Hello, and wishing all of you in advance a good Yom Tov. This version of my Rosh HaShanah sermon is intended for those who will not make it to Shul. If you are planning to come, please watch it after Yom Tov. Vicky and I wish all of us a sweet, happy and successful year, one of growth, good health and peace for all of us, the Jewish people, our beloved Israel, and of course all of humanity. Of course, I give this blessing every year, and I always will. But blessings of health are especially in mind when we, all those who will be in Shul and those who won't, we stood here last year. Who could have imagined that a plague would have ravaged the world? When I sung in Unasana Toikef last year, Umi B'Magefo, who on Rosh HaShanah will be written, and on Yom Kippur sealed, who will live and who will die, who by Magefo, by plague. Who would imagined what has happened in the year past? It sounds like something from a bygone era, but sadly it isn't. Our hearts and prayers go out to the sick, the bereaved. It's unimaginable. At the time of preparing this drosha, about 930,000 people have been recorded as dying from COVID-19 worldwide, 30 million cases, over 40,000 deaths in the UK, and some 500 in our Jewish community. There's unimaginable loss, pain, suffering that will be the abiding memory of 2020, 5780. And it's been a very tough year for our community. The Shul was closed for around 16 weeks, including over Pesach. There's the acute loneliness of those who are isolated and continue to be so. No social activities, kiddushim, simchas, children's programming for a very long time. We, as many of you, are used to having a home filled with guests. That's not happening at the moment, and not for a while. And I've missed our beautiful Shul very much, as I know so many of you had as well. And our thoughts are also with those who are unable to mourn their dead properly. Tiny funerals, curtailed shivers, people unable to say Kaddish for an extended period, and of course to the sick and their families who are isolated from each other at the most difficult time. And we're still yet to fully experience the full economic, social, mental health consequences. That's all just beginning. But I'm immensely proud of how our community has responded. And since gradual easing of the lockdown, even though things are difficult at the moment, we've managed to regroup and within the limitations to do our very best to provide the maximum service for the maximum number of people. And during the lockdown, I'm delighted we were able to provide so many in-person services as well as online tefillah and other things. I'm immensely proud, as I said, of our community. Now, in Yom Kippur, I will consider a Jewish approach to thinking about the pandemic. But for now, our prayers and thoughts are for a better, happier and healthy year ahead. And our prayers in the Shul will include all of those who are unable to join us in person. I will be missing you very much. And I'm sure when we look round and see familiar faces who we know are stuck at home, we will be thinking of you throughout Rosh HaShanah and Yom Kippur, and do include us in your prayers too. It's an opportunity to briefly say thank you to so many people, to Rabbi Sam and Hadassah, our extraordinary partners in ensuring the success of the community, the amazing success and continued development of Rimon and Little Goldies, despite tremendous adversity this year. Thank you to our youth director, Hannah Kaufman, and Mazel Tov on her recent engagement. To our Gaboyim, Rob and Moshe in our women's office, Adina. To Joanna in the office, to Siraj. To Robert and the security team. To our extraordinary executive and board, the executive, Naomi, Joel and Adam. But this year, there are some additional thank yous. We've had to do what we would call COVID emergency management. We've been advised by doctors, Benny Chain, Daniel Hochhauser and others, as well as Dina throughout. We've needed extra chesed teams to reach out to people and to provide things, particularly around Pesach, that were not otherwise available. Rachel, Jackie, Julia, Susan, we're very grateful to all of you. And special thanks are reserved for a superhuman organisation pre-Yom Tov, during the Yom Tov, with an incredible amount of time, and particularly focus on the efforts of Dina and Rob, aided very ably and supported by Naomi. Without you, there would be no Yom Tov at all at Dunstan Road, whether in or out the Shul. And with the support of the office, we have a great debt of gratitude. Thank you is inadequate. Now, you know the story of the conservative American synagogue that had an overflow service for Rosh HaShanah and Yom Kippur, and it was unable to afford both a rabbi and a chazan for the occasion. So after some consideration, its executive decided that they would hire a second rabbi and they would display the service from the main synagogue on a screen. So they hired a temporary rabbi for the second service, and the senior rabbi briefed him. And the brief is very simple. Say whatever you like, but you must speak for exactly 11 minutes, because that's the length of my sermon and we have to make sure things coordinate. So our fellow prepares and practices, and he thinks he's got it down to exactly 11 minutes. But on the day, it doesn't go quite right. They're all sitting in their seats, the screen is on, they put the Sefer Torah away, and it goes blank. And the second rabbi gets up, but unfortunately there's a bit of a kerfuffle, people don't settle down quickly, he drops his notes, and he's already a couple of minutes late. As he gets into his stride, he stumbles over a few words, and there's a bit of heckling from the audience, and he's now 3 minutes behind, and he's looking at his watch, knowing what's going to happen if it all goes wrong. And finally, as we get very near the end of his time, he reaches the denouement of his sermon, and he asks with raised arms, "This year, ladies and gentlemen, I must ask you, is God dead?" And suddenly the screen comes on behind him. Yiskadal, v'yiskadash. Now this joke is not new. But a synagogue service on a screen seemed like a good joke just a few months ago. But this year, for many, it's become a reality. Let me ask you a simple question. Do we really need Rosh HaShanah and Yom Kippur this year? All of us have had more than adequate opportunities for introspection, albeit unplanned, to reconsider our priorities, to face our own mortality. And I'll make a confession here. Vicky and I even joined a shul this year. You'll be pleased to hear it's our shul. So why bother with all this year? Haven't we had enough? What purpose does Rosh Hashanah serve in this strange COVID reality? The truth is that the New Year and Rosh Hashanah specifically focus much more than just on facing our demons. It's about reshaping our relationship with time. We are going to pray all the way through the Yom Tov season. Zochreinu l'chaim melech hofetz b'chaim. Remember us for life, King who desires life. And when we say life, we mean time. We ask God to give us time. But to deserve time, to credibly ask for time on Rosh Hashanah, I think we need to have an idea what we're planning to do with it. A clue might lie in a tension, a paradox, whether we perceive time as linear or circular. There's a progression, of course, throughout our lives, from birth to death, from young to old, from undeveloped to more sophisticated. But on the other hand, the word shana we use for year, as in le shana tova, means something which is repeated, that goes in a cycle. And machzor, the book we use at this time of the year, means a cycle, something that happens in a cycle. The Sfas Emes, the Gera Rebbe, writing it in the late 19th century, imagines it as a spiral staircase. We do go through a cycle, and we come back to the same place each year, but each year we climb, as it were. We can see further. We have new vistas, better horizons, greater perspectives on the same concepts each year. Rosh Hashanah calls on us to sanctify, to channel every moment of our existence into meaningful pursuits. And it's so easy to get blown off course. As Roma Krishnarik, the contemporary author, in his recent book, The Good Ancestor, says, Facebook is Pavlov and we're the dogs. How do we use our time? Rav Hirsch, writing in the mid-19th century in Germany, examines the concept of Zichron Teruah. The first day of Rosh Hashanah this year is Zichron Teruah, a remembrance of the shofar. We will not actually blow it. It's the message of the shofar. And he says on the first day of the new year, at the changing of time, we should think and to remember and to procure and to retain the message. But what is that message that we are supposed to be renewing as the year begins? That message is that time issues a summons to man to realise that time is the most precious commodity that we have. God's shofar call, says Rav Hirsch, tears asunder the chain of past moral and physical decay and summons us toward light, freedom and life. I suggest that the extraordinary events of 2020 have jolted us to think about our priorities, how we use our time. And if that's the case, then Rosh HaShanah 5781 should enable us to harness, direct and sanctify those thoughts. Most of us have been forced by circumstance over the last few months to stay at home much more than usual, to engage in ordinary things, simple, inexpensive family activities, walking when we're able, reading, cooking, small acts of kindness, conversation, intimacy. Perhaps the redemption of such a painful, ghastly year is the rediscovery of the ordinary, the embracing of the mundane as a means to personal growth. As George Eliot wrote in The Mill on the Floss, what novelty is worth that sweet monotony, where everything is known and loved because it is known? And yes, The Mill on the Floss is one of the books that I read during the lockdown. Finding meaning in the ordinary, in the simple, spirituality in the monotonous. This takes us 1, 2 or even 3 cycles up the spiral staircase, Shana b'Shana, year by year through the cycles. This Rosh HaShanah, one which is unprecedented in its character, and I know the word unprecedented is overused, but I believe it's appropriate here. This Rosh HaShanah, let's capture some of those priorities and the spirit that many of us have managed to capture during the period of the last few months. Let's ensure that we take that renewed priority, the renewed appreciation of the ordinary and the mundane, well beyond the current crisis. And then when we daven, Zochreinu l'chaim melech chofetz b'chaim, remember us for life, King who desires life, then we have a sense of what we're going to do with that time and can stand credibly before God. May it be a year of blessing from God for us, for our families, all of humanity, a healthy, good year for all of us, a year in which this plague will be vanquished and we can truly say, L'chaim, to life. L'shana tova u'mesuka, gut gebencht yor, and thank you.